There's been a lot of talk recently about Titans, about how they're not good, their prismatic kit is bad. So how much of that is actually justified and how much of that is just people coping? The Titans aren't good sentiment originally stemmed from Salvation's Edge, the contest version. If you were following the race, you will have noticed that a very small percentage of teams actually had a Titan in their group for their completion. I played a Titan for about 24 hours or something like that, and then ended up switching to Hunter after seeing how easily people were clearing the damage check on the Witness. It was the first time ever that I did not complete the contest mode on my Titan. Titans struggled in the Witness counter specifically because their toolkit compared to that of Hunters and Warlocks just didn't offer as much. Hunters are quite dominant right now because of Still Hunt and Celestial Nighthawk. Warlocks have Well of Radiance at an absolute baseline minimum of usefulness, but also have some good prismatic setups that enabled them to slay out pretty nicely, namely the Getaway Artist setup with lots of different elemental buddies and Bleak Watcher turrets. Titans, on the other hand, were easily replaceable with either another Hunter or another Warlock, not really bringing much to the table outside of being a power ammo bot, using Aeons to hit finishers on subjugators, most of the time having to burn their super on them for an easier kill. Their damage was also relegated to Still Hunt or whatever Titans could dig up from the depths of their vault. Their prismatic kit heavily revolves around melee attacks if you wish to play offensively, and as we'll discuss, that isn't really the safest option in the contest mode raid, nor was it even really that smart in the contest raid. You know what's not easily replaceable? Your balls. Nothing to do with shaving on that one, just really trying to find a segue. This video is brought to you by Manscaped. The Groin and Go bundle from Manscaped is for those of you looking to keep it clean, whether you're playing at home or you're out on the town. Included is the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra and the Handyman Face Shaver. The Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra's got two interchangeable blade heads. The trimmer head, so you can hack your way through that jungle of yours, and the foil head to keep it nice and smooth. Up until I was 29, that's more heads than I ever had. Also, much like me until age 29, it's waterproof for a quick cleanup. Your 30s are rough, folks, buckle up. It also comes with a wide range of comb lengths, so you don't have to play the guessing game to see if your hair is evenly cut throughout. No more weird looks at the beach for me this year. Mainly because I won't be going, because it's outside. Nothing really to do with my facial hair. For those who want to keep their face smooth on the go, the Handyman is perfect to just throw in your bag. It's small, it's also waterproof, it uses USB-C, it charges super fast, it's got a magnetic blade cover. Legally, Manscaped cannot make this any more convenient, else they be subject to the Clayton Act of 1914. So if you want to look like a person again, head on over to manscaped.com and use code Datto at checkout, and I'm getting you 20% off and free international shipping. That's manscaped.com, use code Datto, you get 20% off, and you get free international shipping. Thank you very much to Manscaped for sponsoring this video. In the grand scheme, do I think Titans are really in trouble in something like the raid currently? Not really. I run the normal version of the raid every week and frequently see myself at the top of the damage charts using a microcosm on the Witness. My Titanness is not the problem or detrimental on any of the other encounters either. It's mainly a Witness-specific contest mode issue. But even on the most rare but also competitive of days, it doesn't feel great knowing that simply by being on a Titan that I am probably being a detriment to my team. Their defensive capabilities are simply not strong enough or useful enough to warrant bringing, and the Well of Radiance nerf did very little, if outright nothing, to impact the raid race as a whole. Which brings us to Prismatic. Now I want to preface this by saying that Bungie has said that they're already having discussions about Titan and Prismatic, but let's look at why some people aren't really too happy with Prismatic Titan right now. The main issue that people are having is that it feels like there is only one practical build for Prismatic Titan, and that's Knockout and Consecration with Frenzied Blade so that you can get 3 melees. When I was at the preview event for Final Shape, I ran with Knockout and Diamond Lance with Point Contact Cannon Brace, and while I do feel like that is another option to run in the kit, or maybe you're running Skullfort or something like that, especially with, Contact being on the exotic class item. Most people have leaned towards Consecration. Either way, both of these setups heavily revolve around the use of melee attacks, which for Titan isn't the most unwarranted, but that's all they really have for Prismatic. The other two aspects are Unbreakable, which is a short duration shield that uses your grenade and reflects damage back, and Dranger's Lash, which sends out a suspension wave from your wall or from your character if using Thruster. These are both very defensive in nature, offering very little in the way of extra firepower. Unbreakable feels like it's more tuned with Void in mind, which makes sense, but Prismatic offers very little ways to regenerate grenade energy, making the uptime on it very low. Now, all this might be fine if there were a lot of places where that defensive capability was valuable, or if these abilities led to more offense. This is the issue that I had with the Ward of Dawn adjustments when those were announced. There are not many times in the game, if any, that investing my entire super into a defensively driven effect is worth it over just throwing a giant axe at an enemy's head and calling it a day. Fully defensive kits have not really needed to be a thing in the game for many years now. It's pretty much always better to go nearly full offense to handle any sort of difficult terrain. Even Stasis Warlock, which can be thought of at least slightly in a defensive way, has a lot of firepower backing it up. What would you rather bring? A Bleak Watcher turret that can very rapidly refresh a grenade charge, freezing and slowing enemies everywhere, or Dranger's Lash, which could halt a champion for a couple of seconds at best, or maybe tag a couple of dinky enemies? Now, I don't want to get this twisted with Prismatic Titan isn't good, because in the content that the average player probably plays, the Knockout plus Consecration setup is quite potent. But the higher you venture into endgame content, into content that's minus 10, 15, 20 levels, the less and less appealing Prismatic gets. Could you make it work in some endgame content? I'm sure many high skill players are making it work. But does that mean everything is fine? No, not necessarily. This is exclusively a melee-based setup. Both aspects revolve around getting melee kills, and I don't care how much range Consecration has, you're still gonna need to get closer to the enemy in order to make it work. And then if you're also using Thunderclap, then you gotta get even closer. Facet of Balance also does a lot of heavy lifting. I know anytime I don't actually slide and try to melee attack, I'm not seeing those melee charges come back for a while. Diamond Lance is a nice middle ground between the two extremes of the subclass, but the synergy with Consecration, it's not exactly game-breaking, or if you wanted to use Thunderclap, not exactly game-breaking. Sure, ability kills aren't too hard to come by with Consecration in lower-end content, or if you wanted to run Unbreakable, those reflect kills aren't too bad either, but the combat flow of using Consecration still feels very familiar. Consecration plus Knockout isn't really that much different from just playing Consecration on a Solar subclass with some Restoration peppered in. The combat flow is the same as playing on Solar. As someone who played a Consecration build as their main build for the past 6 months, I don't hate it, but my experience is only changed by adding in Transcendence and making sure I have a mix of damage types. Unbreakable in lower end content doesn't really ever feel justified, since I never really need to protect myself to such a degree in the first place, nor do the enemies really do enough on average to even warrant such a response. Now, when it comes to Unbreakable and Dranger's Lash in a GM experience, you're in a Nightfall, for example, where defense does have a bit more value, these two have basically no synergy with each other at all. I'd rather just play Void or just play Strand outright. Like, why only get the dinkier parts of each one of those subclasses when I could fully invest into Void Overshields and ability regen and defense, or the crowd control and defense of Strand? Ability kills are also going to be harder to come by, which gives Diamond Lance less value as well, the only other slightly defensive option. Even their exotic class item isn't really that thrilling. There are only a small handful of perks that have any actual synergy, much less are actually good. Sure, you have things like Assassin Contact or Assassin Syntho, but I would argue that going invis isn't really a big part of the Titan experience. Inmost Light synergizes with most things' abilities, but at that point, when do you just throw on Heart of Inmost Light and call it a day? All of the better options for the Titan exotic class item are melee driven. All the top tier combinations, which we'll talk about in another video, they're all melee driven. Severance Enclosure, melees and finishers. Assassin, melees and finishers. Inmost Light, half of that's melee. Contact, that's powered melee. Syntheseps, melee when surrounded. I'm not saying that other combinations of perks don't work or can't be built around, but of all the research that I've done on the class items, most people lean in the direction of those perks, and not just on Titan. The crazy thing too is that Hunters arguably get to do the melee thing even better than Titans with specific setups. Stuff like Caliban's or Inmost Light with Assassin, Liar, Syntho. They are capable of putting out some ridiculous numbers thanks to Combination Blow. Granted, the combat flow of Combination Blow is still familiar, but at least Hunters get a little more fanfare with their combat and the damage to boot, not to mention their grapple melee capabilities. Swapping out Unbreakable and Dranger's Lash for other things might not be the worst idea if Bungie wanted to experiment. The problem is that the exotic class items are all tuned specifically for the aspects that we have available on each class, so you would need to swap out those perks as well. Like, you can't have Bear without Unbreakable, you can't have Abeyant without Drengers, right? Something like Controlled Demolition doesn't even have an exotic perk attached to it in any way, although Flechette Storm's effect on Wishful Ignorance feels like it could be rotated in. Removing some of the defensive capabilities might affect Titans in stuff like Master and GM Nightfalls, where it's at least a little more valuable, though. I don't see Bungie giving Banner of War to Prismatic anytime soon, though. Even Into the Fray would probably be an upgrade. I think that's all I have for Prismatic Titan. Again, I don't think it's a bad subclass. I don't think it's an ineffective subclass, but it does feel limited in effective builds for what was meant to be a place to explore a bit more. While other builds that don't involve Consecration, Knockout, or Diamond Lance can work, they just don't really feel warranted in a world where Hunters and Warlocks have crazy setups of their own and feel like they can do more than Titans can. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.